Is there a diet that will make diseases disappear forever? I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome back to another Dr. Westman Reacts. If you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto the right way, please look in the description below. Thanks for your ideas, for videos to respond to, and feedback. I appreciate it. This is a video sent to me from a doctor called Dr. Mindset. Dr. Mindset, Dr. Pradeep Jamnadas, is going to be talking about how the diet is important, and maybe he's come up with a diet that will make any disease disappear forever. Well, as we've talked before, we know there's a lot of extreme language, and I try to keep it reined in. You know, it's not danger if you're eating a piece of fruit or a slice of red meat. It's not danger. You're not on the edge of the cliff. But these things might be harmful or risky, or no, it's not even risky. But anyway, so the title is a little extreme, but let's see what the doctor has to say.
This addictive pattern of eating every few hours all the time, it's really an addiction, and it seems to give us that instant reward, and it doesn't really matter what you're eating, but it's the fact that you're eating all the time, and we need to get out of this.
Well, that's a great lead. Yeah, why do we eat all the time?
There is digital addiction, there's alcohol addiction, there's gambling addiction, there's other forms of addictions, and sugar addiction. And all these things seem to go to that part of the brain that gives us that reward. So we're living in a society where it's all about the instant rewards. And when you prime yourself in one area, you can slip into other areas as well. And that brings up this whole addiction thing, that perhaps this pattern of eating that we've developed and this addictive pattern of eating every few hours all the time, it's really an addiction.
I agree. For some, not everyone. Just like alcohol, it can be problematic, and you can get so addicted that you lose your job, and it can be life-threatening and all. Nicotine addiction, I spent 10 years working in smoking cessation. I worked with the inventor of the nicotine patch and got to learn about how to develop drugs for smoking cessation, and then I switched over to diet and have been in the diet space for nutrition for the last 25 years. But yeah, addiction, it's real. There are actually two, food addiction. There are two textbooks now that are called ultra-processed food addiction, and sugar is part of that, of course. But there are whistleblowers who have come out and written books. One book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, where the industry basically manipulates the food to find something called the bliss point, so that if you choose to have, or is it your choice? If you eat a Dorito or Frito, I don't mean to call out any particular brand, but you eat one and then you can't stop eating it. Do you remember when the company said, bet you can't eat just one of our potato chips? You don't see those ads anymore because, you shouldn't, because that is really acknowledging and pushing food as an addiction. We call those trigger foods in the medical obesity treatment, the keto world. If a food triggers your hunger and cravings and you can't stop eating it, that's a trigger food. So even in the context of a low-carb keto diet, there can be trigger foods. A lot of people are surprised when they come to my office and learn our method, which is a very simple version of a keto diet that existed before any biohacking or measurements with apps, that sort of thing. A lot of people are surprised that I don't let people have nuts at first. Sometimes even that's the only thing people need to change to make their program start working. The nuts, if you're someone who has a tub of nuts and you're finding that you're scooping out from that all day long, or even not able to control it, let those go for a while. So addiction, I like this so far. Addiction to food is real. Now, some people say, well, you need to eat. Yeah, but you don't need to eat addictive foods. Even if they're there at the grocery store checkout, and very available. You don't have to eat them, and although you'll feel compelled, I suppose, if you are addicted, and you'll want that consumption over and over. And the idea that it hits the dopamine reward center in the brain is a pretty common one. It's been studied to the level of allowing animals in a cage, rats or mice, to choose to have sugar or cocaine or other drugs of known addictive quality. And most of the time, the animal will choose sugar instead.
And it seems to give us that instant reward. And it doesn't really matter what you're eating, but it's the fact that you're eating all the time, and we need to get out of this. Yeah. So we need to really look at our whole life to say that, look, the dopamine centers are primed already from a young age.
Well, but that's not to say you can't enjoy food. And I don't think he's saying that, but if you eat really great, tasty foods, and in the nutrition / dietitian chef world, fat carries the flavor. So if you're going to be using a high-fat diet, a low-carb diet, to reverse obesity or other metabolic problems, you're actually able to make food that's delicious, and you're not eating it all day long because you're not in an addictive cycle of that dopamine reward. So some people, though, are kind of a gustatory or gourmand where you do love and are addicted to the flavors and the smells and the feel of it. And some people are texture eaters, and I don't like that because I don't like the texture of it. But that's all part of this human condition where not everyone has that, but some people do.
And yes, we are addicted. The book that I just finished reading a few months ago, Dopamine Nation, I think it's called. Yeah. Fascinating insights that, you prime yourself in one area and then you'll slip into another addiction very easy. And I think that food is one of them.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that food is one of them. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a whole lifestyle. And I tell my patients that if you really want to current eating habits, we need to look at your whole life as well. Are you addicted to alcohol? Are you addicted to caffeine? Are you addicted to sugar? Are you addicted to even digital? Because it's just the way we're priming ourselves. Yeah. And when they start looking into that, they do see insights that, oh my God, he's right. No, I am probably addicted to this pattern and I can't get out of it. Eat. Insulin comes in, puts everything into storage. So you build up some fat. And then you're supposed to live. So when you live, you now start utilizing your calories and you start burning the sugar. When that goes out after maybe about 4 hours or 5 hours, glycogen stores in your liver and in your muscles start breaking down, start giving you the calories that you really need to burn so you can run, do your day-to-day activities and all that. And when you run out of that by, let's say, about 18 hours or 20 hours, and then the body says, I need to start burning fat now. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why you put on fat in the first place.
Well, that was kind of a long-winded method of saying if you're a carb eater, you're going to be a carb burner. So we burn what we eat. And so if you're in this addictive cycle of eating food that has carbohydrates, you're going to be storing the carbohydrates as glycogen, a small amount, probably a day's supply or so. And then any extra sugar actually gets turned into fat and sent to the fat store, the fat tissue or adipose tissue. So if you're changing your body to nutritional ketosis and you don't eat carbs, you don't burn carbs much. So that whole glycogen thing really doesn't happen anymore. And you can run your body on fat. When someone does a low-carb diet or doesn't eat anything for 3 days, you go into a fat-burning mode, which is also called nutritional ketosis. We kind of avoid the term ketosis because doctors and dietitians and the health world were all taught that ketosis was bad. And when you think about the word, osis, look it up, it means abnormal condition of ketones in the blood, because carb eaters and carb burners don't have ketones in the blood. They're not burning the fat that well. Fat generates the ketones, so they don't have elevated ketones, they don't have any measurable ketones, and so that's thought to be abnormal. Remember, laboratory tests that you see from the doctor, the normal range is among carb eaters. So it would be abnormal for someone to have ketones measurable in the blood for a carb eater, but not for someone in nutritional ketosis, or ketonemia would be a better term, because emia just means you have ketones in the blood, doesn't mean the abnormal condition of. So that kind of language is confusing. That's why I like to talk about fat burning. And if you're trying to lose weight, you're really trying to lose fat weight. And burning fat has been found to be a healthy thing to do.
That's why we have fat. It's a storage. And then you start burning that fat. So the fat comes out, comes into your liver, gets converted to some ketones perhaps, and now you're making ketones, and the ketones are being utilized for energy, and then you go for your next meal again. So the body was made to do this. It was not made to just pile on all the time, because that results in increased fat stores, which you'll never break down. So your body was supposed to do this. From the design, you're supposed to do this. So the important thing is that when you eat and you're taking calories, your insulin level obviously goes up. Why? Because insulin has to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. Blood sugar must always come down, because otherwise you get damage from that high glucose level in your bloodstream. That's why we treat diabetes, right? Because the blood sugar, or the glucose rather, attaches itself to proteins, you get glycation end products, and therefore these proteins become dysfunctional. So insulin says, I'm going to take the glucose out, put it down into the storage. First place it puts it into is the liver.
So this is a good physiology lesson here. I wonder what diet he's going to be talking about, though, that when the blood sugar goes up, or glucose more specifically, we say the body doesn't like the blood sugar to go up. Well, that's anthropomorphication, that I'm not sure there's a like or dislike, but the response is to keep the blood glucose lower than higher. And insulin is a hormone that is released from the pancreas to lower the blood glucose levels. And over a long period of time, that elevated blood glucose level can lead to the complications of diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. And he made a good point that the liver is actually making the fat from the carbohydrate that you eat. So fatty liver is actually from the food, the carbohydrate in the food, being turned into fat and then sent out to the fat tissue for storage. So I've seen doctors make that mistake over and over. Oh, you have fatty liver, just cut out the fat in your diet. No, well, that would work if you do it to the extent that you're losing weight. You want to get into a low hypocaloric mode, meaning you're eating less energy than you're burning. But specifically, it's the carbohydrates in the food that can make a big change. You lower the carbs, the fatty liver goes away. One of my patients through the years was an ultrasound tech who went on a low-carb diet and watched the fatty liver on a daily basis melt away when she was doing a low-carb diet. That would have been a fun video to do and respond to. Like, did you enjoy the one about the fellow who had ileostomy and he talked about the food coming out the stool because he had a bag on his stomach? That was a good one. But not everyone's comfortable sharing their own personal information.
When the liver stores are full, then it spills over into the pancreas. More calories come in, there's more glucose, then it goes into the muscles. And it stores everything, and from there into the skin. And that's the way it was supposed to be. But now when we continue to do that, we just keep piling it on. We never get a chance to burn it down, and we're supposed to burn it down. So the biochemistry of the body was made for feeding, fasting cycles. And bioengineering of our body was, but we became dysfunctional because as food became more available, we just kept piling it on and on and on and on. And that's the problem that we have today. It's exactly what you said, excessive calories too frequently. So our insulin levels stay high all the time. So that's the biggest problem I found as a cardiologist. You're eating all the time, you're stimulating your insulin all the time, insulin stays high, never gets a chance to come down. And because your insulin doesn't come back down again, you're always in a storage mode. Yeah. This high insulin is the problem.
I totally agree. And it's great that this cardiologist has the light bulb going off. The idea that metabolic syndrome, the triglyceride and HDL in the blood, not the total and LDL, is the focus you want. You want to look at triglyceride and HDL in the blood, which is a result of this fat storage metabolism, and it's called metabolic syndrome. It's percolating its way into some guidelines and all, but most cardiology trained in the idea that it's cholesterol total and LDL as the major, if not the only, focus, and you need to treat that with medication. They're not trained to know that you can actually treat that with lifestyle, like the lifestyle that we teach at Duke. And then also this cardiologist is I think, starting to go into the direction of fasting. Don't eat all day long, but give your body a chance to respond without food going in.
We've hormonally changed because we're eating too frequently. We're not designed to eat that frequently. Insulin's supposed to go up.
It's funny, he always says, we're not designed. Well, really? I mean, again, that's trying to persuade you to think outside the box of not our own personal experience, but as we certainly lived through eras where there was food and there wasn't food, and if you had stored the food on your body during a famine or a wintertime, that's what you would have drawn upon, and it would help you survive, kind of like a hibernating bear. You need a fat store to go through the wintertime when there's no food.
Then come back down again. We stay up all the time, so your body develops, in a simple terms, insulin resistance.
Now, I really like that point. Now, it's a subtle point, if you haven't heard me speak before. It's the insulin being high all the time that causes the insulin resistance, not the other way around. And that, chicken or the egg sort of thing, I can reverse insulin resistance by having people take away the food that raises the insulin. So I'm not giving any medication to reverse insulin resistance. I'm reducing it because insulin being high is the cause of the insulin resistance. It's like you're in a room and it's noisy and it's loud. You're at a concert, a rock concert, and it's really loud. Your ears turn down the response. So and even afterwards you might have ringing in your ears and all that. So insulin is responding. The cells reduce their response to insulin because the insulin is high. And so many people are trained the other way, that the insulin resistance is some abnormality inside the cell. If we can only look into the cell even more, we'll be able to find the cause of insulin resistance. They're not looking at what the input to the cell is. In fact, I met a researcher who was designing studies to create the insulin resistance with the food, and then to see if they can fix it by manipulating inside the cell with a drug or an enzyme or a genetic change. And so they know what's in the food that causes it. So we're not trying to figure out a new drug. We're trying to help the person, the human, so you can actually reverse insulin resistance by cutting out the food that raises the insulin, and it's the insulin being elevated that causes the insulin resistance.
I do discuss with my patients how far are they along the path of this processed food addiction, and what is the consumption. I mean, today it's really sad that almost 57% of all the calories that they're consuming these days are coming from processed or ultra-processed foods. So you got to bring that number down. So changing the content of the diet first before we even introduce fasting. I think you're very right. You got to change what they're eating first. Because if you just go straight into dieting, they will get a lot of withdrawal symptoms. And then, as I said, they're going to be so dismayed and feel so bad, they'll fall off the bandwagon, they'll never come back again.
Well, there is a method to teaching how to eliminate carbohydrates out of the diet with education, and maybe even adding some salt to reduce your symptoms of changing, and then using sugar-free alternatives so that you can have sweet things temporarily to get you through any kind of craving withdrawal. But so the method of how you do it makes a big difference in the short term, how hard it is or easy it is to do, and even in the long run. If you learn a complicated method, it's harder to keep it going in the long run. So you want to learn a simple method like we teach in order to be able to do it for the long term.
So do make the change. You got to give them alternative foods. You got to show them that these foods are the ones that are non-addictive foods that you got to get on, which is basically whole foods, real food. If it looks like that in nature, eat it. If it's going to go bad, eat it. If it's got a barcode on it, be suspicious. Don't touch it. If it's got a food label on it, be suspicious. try not to read it or eat it. Just get rid of it.
Well, those are pretty simple shortcuts that I like. Of course, we teach total carb, not net carb. So if you're looking at the labels, you look at total carbohydrate. You don't have to worry about the calories. And there are some foods that come with labels. There are many that don't come with labels that really should have great for keto on them, right? So if you look at the ground beef, you would think they should, stamp it with great for keto diets. But so if you're going to the grocery store and you're just looking for products that have keto, you want to stay away from ones that have that on their name, or be very suspicious, like he's saying, and then you look at the total carbohydrate, not net, and use that to determine how it's going to affect your body. Not everyone has the ability to not absorb the fiber and not have the sugar alcohols affect you. So I make the assumption that, and I don't want to make an assumption, that some of you may actually absorb the non-absorbable fiber. Yep, that's what it's called, non-absorbable, but some people do absorb it. And so if you're having trouble, you're at a stall, you want to make sure you're doing total carbs. And we haven't heard what diet he's promoting, right?
So just go for real food. So people come to me and say, you're a cardiologist, so, I became a vegetarian and I don't eat meat anymore. And I was one of them that believed that meat, this is bad stuff. I'm cardiology, FACC. I realized that the research doesn't support that. So why would red meat be bad for you? It can be. And my association with that, or my interest in that, is that if it's grain-fed cows, you're going to have too much omega-6. That omega-6 is getting into you now. So that beef is not going to have the same concentration of fats of cow that's eating grass, because that's a grass-fed cow. It'll have more omega-3 and it'll have more saturated fat in it, not the omega-6s. You see, you are what you eat and what that ate.
So I'm going to just editorialize here just a bit. That part is a little pop culture-y. It merges these paradigms that don't need to be merged. I mean, either you believe the sun goes around the earth or the earth goes around the sun. You can't have it both ways. Either you drive on the right-hand side of the road or the left-hand side of the road. So saturated fat is not bad. And the idea that you are actually eating a much healthier bit of meat because it has a certain grass-fed finish to it, I haven't been persuaded by the evidence in humans yet. Yes, the quality of the food is different, and there's a lot of fear or worry, but let's get some data in actual humans. I say that because I've had people eat McDonald's, having their burgers that they're not they're highly processed. I think even there's something like green slime in there. I don't know what it is, but I have to meet people where they are, and I don't preach a unattainable sort of diet. I have to help people. This is my mission, is to help people where they are. And this fellow lost a lot of weight just eating McDonald's burgers because of the lowering of the insulin from lowering the carbs is the most important factor going on. It's the most powerful factor. If you have to worry about having super clean food, grass-fed beef, avoiding seed oil, so you have to make your own salad dressing, this is a minor issue. And yes, you might get benefit from that, but in general, most people will be helped by just keeping the carbs super low and even eating food from fast food places or restaurants, things that you aren't making on your own.
So meat is actually okay, provided it's grass-finished and thereby it doesn't have all that omega-6 in it. Chicken is okay, organic chicken. And if your eggs, organic eggs. I have no problem with these foods because they are whole, they're natural. And when I put my patients on these, I get better compliance. Because you can go ahead and eat your egg. Have your egg for breakfast. Just get rid of the toast, just have your 2 eggs for breakfast. Cardiologists saying 2 eggs are fine. Yes, because the cholesterol that's in the eggs is not what's going to raise your cholesterol level. Your cholesterol is what you're making mostly in your liver. So this type of education, they feel better about it and say, doc, let me eat eggs. He lets me eat beef. He lets me eat chicken. Yeah, but I tell them it's got to be the right stuff. And then, of course, with it, you got to have your vegetables with it. So you got to make these changes in their diet so they're eating better quality food, better classes of food in the whole state with everything, just the way nature made it. If it's like that in nature, consume it. If it went to a factory and got changed, get rid of it. That's the bottom line.
Well, I wish it were that simple. There's a lot of nuance, but in general, that's a great way to approach it. Eating real food is the kind of program that I learned and that I studied, published papers about, and still use today. Shop on the outside of the grocery store. This is where the refrigeration is and the freezing typically, and that's where the fresh foods are. But you don't have to have your own chickens in the backyard, although many people do now. And the idea that you have to have farmers market meats, you have to meal prep and all that, just kind of makes keto out of reach for a lot of people, and they could get the benefit of keeping the carbs low and the insulin low and actually reversing insulin resistance, which probably is the root cause of most chronic medical disease today. I hope you like this. If you do, press like, subscribe so you don't miss out on further content. If you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto the right way, please look in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.